started with the topic that we left yesterday. Okay. So yesterday we have discussed about importance of SailPoint. What are the different IAM tools available? Difference between IAQ and ISC, and from there we also discussed what is the reason for like picking up SailPoint when compared to other tools. Okay. Now we will get started with the technical aspects of SailPoint. Okay. So first of all, if we want to install SailPoint, how we need to install it, what kind of tool SailPoint IAQ is. So let's try to understand its high level architecture. Okay, so SailPoint IAQ will be installed as an Java based web application. Okay, so it's a Java based web application. So what is the meaning of Java based web application? So if you want to implement any web applications, there are different technologies that you can use in order to develop that web application. So in this case, for developing the SailPoint IIQ application, the underlying technology that is used is Java. Okay, so that's why it is called Java-based web application. And first of all, let's try to understand this. So the underlying technology is Java, that is well and good. And what is this web application? So what exactly we mean by web application? Or at least let's try to understand the different types of applications that we have. Okay, so we have something called system applications, or they're called native applications, like that. Next to this, we have something called mobile applications, and we have web applications. Okay, so these are the different types of applications that we'll be having. So when we say system applications, it means that particular software that we'll be using, right? That software will be installed in any one of the systems. For example, your laptop. So you can install a particular software in your laptop and you can use it. Otherwise, you can install a particular software within your any of your electronic devices, like in your washing machines, ACs. Also, there will be some small softwares. So they're system specific software. So where you need to install those softwares on that particular system, and then you can use it on that particular system. So next to this, we have mobile applications. We all are familiar with this. We have Android applications, iOS applications. So here, these applications will be installed in your mobile and you can use it. Okay, so when someone is developing this application, so they specifically develop it for mobiles. Okay, so you will download it from your App Store or Play Store and you can install and use it on your mobile. So these are mobile applications. On the other hand, we have something called web applications. So web application means if you access any software through a web browser. Okay, so the browser could be anywhere. Either it could be in your laptop or it could be in your mobile. So if you access any application through a web browser and if you are able to utilize the services of that application, then that particular application is called web application. Okay. Now, this SailPoint IAQ is going to be a web application. It means if you want to use this SailPoint IAQ application, then you will be accessing that application through your browser and then you will be using it. Okay. So this SailPoint IAQ is going to be a web application and it's a Java-based web application. Now we need to understand what is the underlying infrastructure present for a web application. Okay. So what are the different components present in a web application so that we will implement the same for SailPoint IA. So basically, any web application you take, any web application that is available, it works on a mechanism called client server architecture. So the underlying working architecture behind any web application is nothing but client server architecture. And this is also sometimes called as request response mechanism. Okay. So what is this client server architecture? So let's try to understand it with the help of a simple diagram. Okay. So you can see like this is how a client server architecture basically looks. So it contains like two major parties. One is client and the second one is server. Okay. So client means people who makes the request. For example, I'm opening the web browser. Okay. I'm opening a browser. So this browser is nothing but a client. Okay. Now from this browser, I am trying to request for a particular website. For example, Amazon.com or Amazon.in. So this is what I am requesting. From the browser, I am sending an request. Okay, I am sending an request in order to access something called Amazon.in. Okay, so this is what I am doing here through my client. Okay, client always makes requests, whatever they want, whatever may be the services they want to consume. So that service is requested through the client. So this way we will send the request for whatever may be the service that we want. If you carefully observe, when I hit enter, you can observe this icon. Okay, so if I hit it, you can see it is loading. So once it is loaded, then we are getting something like this. We are getting an home page like this. Okay, so in the behind scenes, what is happening is if a client makes a request from the browser, okay, and when they hit the URL, that URL is going to some server in the background. Okay, so that particular request is going to some server in the background, and once it reaches this server, the server process the request. Now, what is the request I have made? I have requested for Amazon.in. So it goes to internet. It tries to find a server where this Amazon.in is hosted. In the internet, it goes to a place where this Amazon.in is hosted, and it tells the server, boss, I need something called Amazon.in. Then this server process the request. Okay, so this person need Amazon.in. So it processes the request, it generates the response. Okay, and it sends the response back to the client. So whatever may be the response that we are getting from the server, so that is what being displayed here. Okay, so this way, any web application basically works on client server architecture. So client means our browser. So the place from where we will use it. We will try to access the web applications. Okay. So client is nothing but your browser, and server means, so there are some servers which are dedicated for processing the request, and it takes care of your web application. So we will talk more about these servers now. But on a high level, the way the web application works is through this client server architecture. So here we have two mechanisms: client who makes a request, and we have server which generates the response. Okay, so these two are the major components involved in an like using web application. So this is called client server architecture, and the mechanism behind this client server architecture, I mean the working mechanism behind this structure is request response mechanism. Clients make a request, the request goes to the server processes the request, it generates a response, and it sends a response back to the client. So just the way we are sending request like this, in the back end, the request is processed and we are getting the response back like this in this page. Okay. For example, if I hit on any other page, let's suppose if I click on this particular option, it means through this mouse click, again, I am sending a request. You can see if I click on this, you can see in the URL, so some data is sent. It means by clicking this, I am sending a request to give a particular information. So once this request is sent, so I received a response back. So the response I received is like this page. So this way, the entire this web application thing they work on client server architecture, and it involves a request response mechanism. Okay, so this is the basic functionality. I mean, this is the basic way in which any web application works. So once you install your SailPoint, SailPoint will also works in a similar fashion, and this is the architecture involved behind it. Okay, so now in order to implement this client server architecture, or in order to implement this request response mechanism, so basically, if you want to make an web application work, what are the different softwares involved? Okay, so what are the different types of softwares that we need? So let's try to understand that. Okay, so first of all, we need some implementation technologies like Java. Okay, so after Java, we need a browser. Okay, so next to this browser, we need app server, application, or it is called as web also. Anything is fine. We need a server, application server or web server. Sometimes, if you want to store the data, you need a database. Okay. So these are the different applications that we need. Okay. So now let's try to understand what these applications are, and how these applications are interconnected with each other, and what are the particular softwares and hardwares that is required for implementing our SailPoint IIQ application. Okay, let's go ahead. And majorly, this is very, very important. Application war file. Okay, application war file need to present. This is the actual application. Okay, so basically, if you want any web application to work, first of all, that web application needs to be that web application needs to be deployed inside a web server. So what is this web server? So it is called as web server, or sometimes it is also called as application server. So it's a dedicated software. Okay, so a web server is a dedicated software. So that is basically used for hosting an web application, and this web server is responsible for listening to the incoming request, processing the request, and generating the response and sending the response back to the client. So it's a when we talk about this web server, it is nothing but a separate software that is meant for hosting and implementing web applications. So the best example that we can think of for an web server is your Apache Tomcat, or if you have worked with this one, WebLogic. Have you worked with web applications anytime before? Web application development or web application implementation anytime before? Anyone has any previous knowledge on this? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, Kalyan.
Okay,
No,
so
Apache, I used Apache Tomcat. I was working for Mule 3 application, but not in a
mhm,
higher scale. So just for the support project. So I don't have much insights on them.
okay, got it. Okay, so what we will do is we will get started from beginning. Okay, so don't think like we are talking unnecessary things, but it's a good information to know. So we will get the basic knowledge of a few things. Okay. So first of all, there will be few terminologies that we'll be using very frequently that most of the time we will not be clear about those terms. Okay. So what I believe is like if we are clear about all those things, then we will have better understanding of what we are learning. Okay. So I have a question. So whenever you listen to the term server, so what comes to your mind? So what is your understanding of server? Please let me know your opinions. Like I need to know like what's
Server
your
will
standpoint? What?
it is
Mhm,
going to
go on.
be providing all the information would be stored in the server firstly, and it's going to be responding it to the request uh, from the client, and all the informations, applications, the databases, and everything would be installed and
Mhm.
processed in the server. And
Okay.
specifically with respect to our data flow standpoint, right? From the entire life cycle standpoint of the data flow is processed with from the server onwards.
Okay. Got it. And any other thoughts?
Maybe information which is sitting somewhere in the cloud, to access that we need a route, which is server.
Okay.
We can
And
also say like it's a system where the program runs.
system where the program runs. Correct. Okay. So I'll do one thing. So if I don't know something, right? So what we will generally do, we'll go and search in Google. So let me do the same thing. Okay. So I'll go to Google and I will say server, a computer or software system designed to process requests and deliver data, blah, blah, blah. So if I go to images, you can see this is what I'm getting. Okay. So when we say the term server, these racks that are present, right? So these data cables, the racks, this room with like this structure. So this is what comes to mind to everyone. Okay, that is very common. So this is what generally reflects when we say the term server. But in our day-to-day life, as we use this term more frequently, so we need to have a clear categorization. So whenever you say the term server, so basically there are two like ways in which we can refer it. When we say the server, we can say server as a hardware, and you can categorize it as server as software. Okay. So basically, if you want to understand the term server, you can basically understand it in two ways. A server could be an hardware. So this is what we are looking here. So if you take up an processor, if you take up an CPU, if you take up some RAM, and if you put all these hardware components set together, then that is a server. So when we refer to that server, it means we are referring to that hardware. So what are maybe the hardware components that are required for our computation purpose? So if you put it together, then that becomes a server. So just the way we can see here. So this is a server rack, and each one is a server. It means like each one has the individual components required to perform the any computation. Okay. So when you say the term server, it could be hardware that we may be referring. Okay. When we say server as a hardware, this is what we are referring. All the hardware components that are required for computation purpose. On the other hand, when we say the term server, we can also refer to some of the softwares that will be running on this hardware server. Okay. And again, when we say server as software, there are different types of servers again. So we have something called OS server. So if you take Windows 11, or when you take Windows Server 2016, or when you say RH, Enterprise Linux servers, or Red Hat Linux servers. Okay, so all these are nothing but softwares. So what softwares there? They're operating system softwares. Okay, so do we call this as server? And do we call this as server? So we will say Linux servers, Windows servers, etc. So when we say Linux server or when you say Windows server, it is nothing but the operating system that you are referring. Okay, even though you are calling it as server, so basically you are referring to the operating system. So this operating system is nothing but a software. Okay, so this is what we mean by server as a software. Okay, so when you say the term server, you are not basically referring to the hardware server, but you are referring to the operating system server, your Windows server or Linux server. So these are nothing but your operating system servers, which are nothing but softwares. Okay. On the other hand, we have something like database servers. Okay. So database servers in the sense your Oracle server or your like MS SQL server. This is also called a server. MS SQL is commonly called as server. So this is also a software. And what is the purpose of this software? The main purpose of this software is to store the data. Okay. So these servers acts as databases. It means a permanent storage of our data. Okay. So these softwares are also called as servers, but their purpose is to store the data, and that's why they are called database servers. Okay. So on the other hand, we have web servers. So this is what we are actually talking. So sometimes it is also called as app servers, or sometimes it is also called as web servers. And the example for these types of servers is Apache Tomcat, WebLogic, Glassfish. So what is this? This is also a software. This is also a software. And what is the major purpose of this software? The major purpose of this software is to host web applications, okay, to receive the incoming request, to generate the response and send the response back. So this is what we are talking here. Okay, so this is a server. So when we say a server, it is a software that we will install. And the purpose of this software is to process web application requests and to host web applications. Okay, so these are called web servers or app servers. Okay, here it is also a server, but this is a software server. Okay, and the main purpose of this server is different. Okay, so when you install SailPoint, okay, when you try to install SailPoint, all these components comes into picture. So that's why I don't want you people to be confused. So that's why I made these things clear. Okay, so hardware, we never deal with it. Okay, in real time, we will never deal with hardware. So there will be a dedicated team like who will be taking care of these hardware related things. And the only way we will be using any of the servers is through in the form of software only. Okay, so you forget about hardware, but when you say server, there are chances people might be referring the hardware also, but we never deal with hardware. We will only deal with these softwares. Okay. So in order to install your SailPoint IIQ application also, we need all these components, all these software components. Okay. So now let's try to list down different software components. What are the software components that are required for installing our SailPoint IIQ application? So first of all, we need one operating system. So we always need an hardware platform. As I mentioned, we are never worried about it. In real time, we will never see the hardware. We don't know where the hardware is present, but we will be given an operating system. So we need an operating system for our SailPoint installation. Okay. So next to this operating system, we need one web server, or app server, whatever we call. We need an web server because the SailPoint IIQ is a web application. So in order to host a web application, we need a web server. Okay. So web server is only meant for processing the web application related information. Receive the request, generate response, only those things. But when we are dealing with SailPoint, right, when we are dealing with this application, we need to store a lot of information. So we will be generating data about a lot of things. Okay, we need to store the data. So in order to store the data, we need database server. Okay, we need database server. And we need the SailPoint IIQ application itself. IAQ installer, you can call it as installer. So we need this installer in order to install it. And this SailPoint IIQ, as it is going to be an Java-based web application, in order to run the Java application, we need Java platform. We need Java. So even within Java, we especially need JRE. Okay, if you have JDK, that is also fine. But especially we need JRE. And this installer is going to be an var file. So always remember, whenever you are dealing with web applications, okay, so whenever you are developing an web application or whenever you are like installing an web application, we always deal with var files. Okay, if you take any file, any file that we install, right, you can see it is present as application. The extension, if you can see, right, it is present as an application, or it will be present as a runnable file, a run file like that. It means that is a format. That is the format for the applications that will be installed. Okay. So similarly, any web application you take, the web application, if you want to use it, then it must be present in the form of an var file. So basically, what is a var file? Any idea what is var file?
Is it more like a zip file most of the time? Correct.
Exactly. It's more like a zip file. That is absolutely right. And what is this full form? So the full form of var is nothing but web archive. Okay. So it is nothing but compressed form. So if you take any web application, so that web application at the end of the day, it is nothing but a set of files and folders. Okay. If you take a set of files and folders, if you put it in a web server, then those set of files and folders is nothing but your web application. Okay. So it is very difficult if you keep the folder as it is, right? It takes a lot of memory and it takes a lot of time to copy from one place to another file. Even in our Windows system, if you have like hundreds of files, okay, in one folder, if you want to move it from one place to another place, what we basically do, we will zip it. Okay, so when we zip it, what happens is the overall size of that folder will be reduced, it will be compressed, and also the files, I mean, the particular folder's format is changed. It will no longer be an folder or something. It will be present in the form of an zip file, which is nothing but a compressed format. Okay, so it is easy to move that zip folder from one place to another place instead of like dealing with all the individual files and folders. A similar thing happens in case of war file also. When we develop any web application, so the components present in our web application is nothing but some files, folders, images, all those things put together. That is a web application. So it is very difficult to deal with those files and folders when we want to deploy it and when we want to use it. So that's why we will compress all those files and folders, and that compressed format is nothing but var, which is nothing but web archive. So we have similar compressions we have seen. When you take jar, it is also in compressed format. So it is nothing but Java archive. Okay. So this way, if you take any web application, the installer will be present in the form of var file, which is nothing but an compressed format. And this var is nothing but web archive. Okay, so we will get all the web application installers in the form of var files. So we need this var. Okay, so these are the software components that are required for our SailPoint installation. Okay, fine, well and good. We now understood the different software components involved in order to set up this SailPoint IIQ application. But if you take each of these components, there are different like types of softwares available and different versions available. For example, if you want to take OS, so do we need to take Linux OS or do we need to take Windows OS? Or if you have anything else, do we need to go for that? If you want to go for web server, do I need to go to Apache Tomcat or do I need to go to WebLogic? Like this way, like we need an clear-cut like name of the software that we will use, right? And also, if you take, let's suppose you have decided you want to use Apache Tomcat. Within Apache Tomcat, we have different versions. We have Tomcat 8, Tomcat 9, 10, 11. We have different versions. Which exact version we need to use? So how we need to determine this one? Okay. So in order to determine the software dependencies, so this is nothing but software dependency, right? Which version of software we have to use, which software we have to use. So in order to understand the software dependencies, first of all, we need to know which version of SailPoint IIQ we have to use. Okay. So once we are clear on which version of SailPoint IIQ we will be using, then we can determine the other ones. Okay. Now let's try to understand SailPoint IIQ versions. SailPoint IIQ versions. So for our lab purpose, for our practice purpose, we will be using SailPoint 8.2, P4 or P3, anything like that. So whenever you are referring to SailPoint IIQ versions, so this is how you refer to that version. Okay. So SailPoint versions are numbered like this. So different softwares, right? They use different notations in order to represent the versions. If you take our Android software, so Android use some candy names, right? Or chocolate names in order to refer its version. And if you take some other softwares like ServiceNow and all, they will use country names in order to denote their versions. Okay. And most of the other softwares, they will use number notations in order to refer to the versions. Okay, so SailPoint also follows the number versions. Okay, so the number you are seeing here, right, 8.2, it is called as base version. Okay, so SailPoint base versions are always numbered. We have the versions like 7.6, 8.0, 8.1, 8.2. All these are the base versions or major versions that we can say. And the latest version of SailPoint that is available in the market is 8.5. 8.5 is the latest version of SailPoint IIQ available in the market. So latest version of the base version. Okay. So this is how the base versions are numbered. Okay. So next to this base version, we have something called patch version. We have something called patch. So this patch is given notation with P. So we will have patch versions like P1, P2, P3, P4 like that. And one important thing is these patches will be individual to our base versions. Okay. If you take 8.0 base version, if you take 8.0 base version, 8.0 may contain P1, it may contain P2, P3 like that. Similarly, for if you take 8.2, again 8.2 has its own P1, P2, P3 versions like this. But the P1 version for 8.0 is different from P1 version from 8.2. It means the patches that we are referring here, right? So the patches are specific to the base version. Okay, so that's why every time when you are referring SailPoint IIQ version, first of all, you will refer the base version. And if there are any patches that is present, we will refer the patch version immediately. Okay, because the patches are specific to the base version. Okay. And one important point where that we need to know when it comes to SailPoint versions is, so the patches are cumulative. So cumulative means, for example, there is some changes added in P1. Okay. And few more changes are added in P2 and P3 like that. So for each patch, there will be new changes that keeps getting added, right? For example, if you take version P3, whatever may be the changes added in P1 and P2, those changes will be present in P3. Okay. So whenever you are installing the patches, you can if you install P3, it means the changes that they added in P1 and P2 that will be already present in P3. So we need not to worry about the previous versions. So this way we can say patches are cumulative, but in case of base versions, they are not cumulative. For example, currently you are in 8.0. Okay. If you want to upgrade to 8.2, you cannot directly upgrade to 8.2. First of all, you have to go to the intermediate versions. From 8.0, you have to go to 8.1. And from 8.1 only, you have to go to 8.2. Okay. For example, if you want to upgrade to 8.5, if you are in 8.0, you have to go to 8.1 first. Then you have to go to 8.2, then 8.3, 8.4, and finally you will go to 8.5. So this way, base versions are not cumulative. It means if the changes present in 8.1 or 8.2, it is not immediately available in 8.3. It is not directly available. So that is the reason if you want to move from 8.0 to 8.3, you cannot directly install 8.3, or you cannot directly upgrade to 8.3. You have to go to 8.1 first, then you have to go to 8.2, so that we will take all the changes added in these versions. Then finally you will go to 8.3. Okay. On the other hand, patches are not like that. If you want P4, you can directly install P4. All the changes present in P2, P3, everything will be present in P4 already. Okay. So this is how SailPoint versions are referred and SailPoint versions are mentioned. So for our lab purpose, the current version of SailPoint that we are going to use is 8.2 P4. So 8.2 is the base version, and on top of that base version, we will be installing the P4 patch. Okay. Now let's again come to our software components. And as I mentioned, in order to understand the versions of the dependent softwares, we first of all need to understand which version of SailPoint IIQ that we need to use. So now we have decided we need to use version 8.2 and P4. So patch version is fine. It is not that important, but base version is important. So this is the version of SailPoint that we want to install. So to determine the dependent software, we need to refer to the installation guide of SailPoint IIQ. Okay. So for each version of SailPoint, when a new version of the SailPoint software is released, they will be releasing the installation guide also. Okay. In that installation guide, they will clearly mention what is the supported softwares that we have to use, particularly for this version of SailPoint IIQ. Now let's see how we have to refer that installation guide and how we can determine the software versions. Okay. So let me open the installation guide. 1 minute. I'm stopping the screen share. This one important thing to inform you. So when I'm sharing my screen and when I am giving the demo, I will not get notifications for the messages that you send. Okay, if you are sending something in the chat, I will not get the notification. I may miss it. Okay, you always feel free to unmute yourself and raise your doubts or questions. Okay. So if you are putting anything in chat, until or unless I stop my screen share, I will not be able to see that. Okay, so just letting you know that. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so this is how the installation guide looks. Okay, so within this installation guide, let's go down, and you can see in the first thing itself, it is saying something called install and deploy supported platforms. So this is what we have to refer. We need to refer to this supported platforms. Okay, now in this supporting software, you can see we have something called operating systems. We have something called application servers. We have something called database servers, and we have Java platforms. And there is something called cloud platforms also. Let's suppose if you're installing your SailPoint on any cloud platforms, then it is also giving the details. But we are not using cloud platforms. We'll be installing it on our local servers. So that's why we are referring it. And even if you check it, what are maybe the software components that we have listed? Operating system or web server, or it is also called as app server, database, Java. You can see all the software components are present here. Java, database, app server, operating system. So now let's determine the compatible versions. So which versions of softwares that we have to use. Okay, let's first come to operating systems. So what SailPoint is saying, we can use SUSE Linux, Enterprise Server 15 and 12. We can use Windows Server 2016 and 2019, and we can use CentOS 8.3 or 7.9. So these are the supported versions of software that we can use for our SailPoint IIQ 8.2. Okay, but here the operating system that we are going to use for our lab purpose is, this is for our lab purpose. Okay, for our lab purpose, we are going to use Windows 11. But Windows 11 is not present here. Windows 11 is not present here. But how come we use Windows 11? What is our standpoint in using that? Okay, so in order to understand that, let's read it out. Here, we have to read these lines to understand it. Okay, so what it is saying, the distributions and versions of Linux highlighted below have been verified by IAQ engineer, but any currently available and supported distributions and versions of Linux will be supported by SailPoint. Okay, so for this Linux operating system, what they're saying is, boss, what are maybe the versions that we are mentioning here? So these versions are mentioned by the SailPoint engineering team. It means SailPoint has been tested on these particular versions of Linux, but any other available versions of these softwares will also support SailPoint. It is just that they have not verified, but they also support it. So that's what they are saying. And also the important one, implementers and customers should verify that the distribution and version of Linux choice is here, isn't this, compatible with the application server, database server, and JDK being used. Application server, database server, JDK being used. It means whatever may be the operating system that you are using. So the operating systems that are mentioned here, it has been verified by SailPoint. But if you want to use it, make sure the application server, database server, and Linux is supported. Apart from these operating systems, if you are using any other operating system, make sure your app server supports that, your database server supports that, and your Java supports that. As long as these three softwares are supported, you are free to use any of the operating systems. So that is what this particular note is saying. So accordingly, we have decided to use our Windows 11. So the reason is we cannot take one another virtual machine, or it becomes very complex. If you want to go with any of these operating systems, then obviously for practice purpose and all, we will not be having these servers. You have to take another laptop, or you have to install any VMware on your laptop. On that VMware, again, you have to install this OS, and then you have to use it, which is an laborious process. And we need not to take that much effort. Okay, so that's why we are simply going ahead with our Windows operating system only. For practice purpose, that is absolutely fine. Always remember, we can use these Windows 11 operating system or Windows 10 operating systems only for our lab purpose. In real time, you should not be doing that. Okay. When you install SailPoint for any of your customers, okay, so you have to strictly follow these guidelines. Okay. So when you are implementing SailPoint for any of your customers, if they have Windows, you have to use Windows 16 or Windows 19 only. Even if you have Windows 2013 or you have Windows 2022, you should not use it. Even though you have advanced versions, you should not be using it. So what is the
Does it
purpose?
will
What's
not
the reason?
accept Red Hat Linux? Correct me, please.
Sorry?
Does it means it does not accept Red Hat Linux other than SUSE Linux?
Yes, it accepts.
It accepts. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what
And
I'm telling, right? So
if it's
any other
beyond
versions we can use.
if it's beyond 2019 as well, we can use in the Windows Server, right?
Actually, there are no technical limitations. So that's what I'm going to tell you. So there are no technical limitations, but what happens is, for example, when you install your SailPoint and when you face any issues, right? So SailPoint, they generally provide product support. Okay, as you pay the enterprise license, they will give you the product support for any of the issues that you face. Okay, so for example, you face some issue like some behavior is not working as expected. Okay, we'll go and we'll log a support ticket with SailPoint. So during that time, whenever you log a support ticket with SailPoint, the first and foremost thing that SailPoint asks is they will ask you to provide your platform details. They will ask you, boss, which version of SailPoint IAQ you are using, which operating system you are using, which database you are using, which app server you are using. Everything we have to provide. Okay, each and every platform detail that we have to provide to SailPoint. Okay, so once you provide the platform detail, the first thing they will do is, based on the base version of SailPoint that you are using, they will verify whether you are using the supported softwares or not. For example, you are using Windows Server 2022. They will here it is mentioned we need to use Windows Server 2016 and 2019. So if you're using any softwares which is not present here, so what SailPoint will do is they will simply say, boss, you told me like you're facing some issue. But when we verified your platform details, the supported version of operating system that we are saying is Windows 2016 and 2019, but you are using 2022. So you better move to 2019 and you try to replicate the scenario. And if you still face the issue, then you tell us. So that is how SailPoint responds every time. So your issue may not be related to this version. Okay. But what SailPoint do is they will make sure that you are only following the software versions that they have mentioned here. So if you are using any other software, even though it is compatible and even though there are no issues, they always tell that, boss, first you fix that, you move to the versions that we are telling, then you try to replicate the issue. Okay, so that's how you will get the response. So in order to avoid that kind of issues, we always try to stick to the versions that they are mentioning in our real-time implementations. Okay. But for others, like for our practice purpose and all, that is fine because the lab and all, we are practicing it on our own. And anyhow, you will not be getting any product support from SailPoint for our lab purpose because we are not paying any enterprise license. Okay. So for lab purpose, it is okay. We can go ahead and we can use our Windows operating system. And that too, why we are using it? The Windows operating system that we are using, right? It is compatible with our database, web server, Java, everything. So Windows 11 supports all this. So that's why we are going ahead with this one. But in real time, always remember, stick to the versions that they are mentioning here and don't go beyond this. Clear?
On a job, I have a question, right? For a medium to
Mm-hmm.
small scale, these days, right, they want just multi-talented skill, something like that. Do we have to deploy as a suite along with the SailPoint individually is something like application server deployment, database deployment. Altogether, we need to go for it, or we have to just wait for the other teams to deploy this application server software, the database, vice versa.
Yes, in real time, operating system will be provided by someone else. A dedicated team will provide the operating system. Database, we will have a dedicated database team. So they will install and configure the database server for us. Okay. So we will be installing Java and we'll be installing this app server and we will be installing SailPoint IIQ. Operating system will be installed by a separate team. Database will be installed by a separate team. Others we have to install.
Okay. Basically, we need to install the application server for sure, along with this.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Okay, fine. So we are left with only 4 minutes. So I will stop the session here for today and we'll continue with the rest of the topics like the versions for rest of the software components in tomorrow's session. And we'll also see how to download them. And if possible, we'll also try to install them as well. Okay, next session. Okay. So for today, I will stop the session here. And if you have any questions, like you can ask me.
So the recording, are you sharing, or have you for yesterday's and today's, something like that? How
Srinivas will be
exact?
sharing you those recordings.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I have to discuss with him as well. Yeah, okay. I will touch base with him. Thank you.
From others, like any doubts or questions in the topics that we have discussed today?
Yeah, Kalyan, like you saying, like we need to have only Windows system for the lab, so it doesn't work with the Mac.
For Mac also it works as long as the Mac supports your Apache Tomcat, your Java and
Mm-hmm.
database.
Okay.
I tried with Mac last year. It did not work.
Actually, there are people who joined the training and they have used Mac, but the problem is they face a lot of issues
Yeah,
when
yeah,
installing. But it works. It doesn't mean like it will not at all work with Mac. It works, but we'll be facing some issues.
yeah.
So what you can do is, if you have any virtual machines available on your Mac, you can use VMware kind of softwares. In that VMware, you can either install Linux or Windows OS, and on top of that, you can install it. So that will be little easier. But if you want to use it on Mac only, then what you need to do is, so when we install our Apache Tomcat or when we install our database servers, make sure like you are installing the supported versions for that Mac OS.
Yeah.
Then
Got
it will work.
Yeah.
But again, like you may have to spend some time troubleshooting issues here and there.
Mm-hmm.
We observe that, but yeah, that's the way it works.
Okay.
Got it. Any questions further? Or are we good to close? Fine then. Yes, so we'll meet in next session and we'll continue there. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kalyan. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Kalyan, bye.